Welcome back to the second session of the Svemin Höstmöte 2022. I say also welcome to all our viewers online who are now following us. We are live now from Norra Latin here in Stockholm, downtown Stockholm in Sweden. My name is Emma Härdmark and I'm a Director of Communication at Svemin, the Swedish Mining Association, and I will be moderating today. During this session, we will have an international focus, and we will open the session, of course, with the current geopolitical situation. This geopolitical situation has been setting the scene for quite some time now. Therefore, we asked two experienced individuals to join us here to talk this through and make us understand what's going on. Please welcome on stage Johan Sjöberg from the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise and Johannes Malminen from FOI, Swedish Defence Research Agency. Please join me on stage. Welcome.
Many thanks. Thank you.
I will start with you, Johannes, because you joined us and gave a presentation at Svemin Höstmöte 2019. Could you mention, or is there anything in the world, all categories, that is better now?
Well, that is a quite provocative question, of course, but I actually looked back on the briefing I gave and saw that, yeah, I was pretty much right on the mark there. I thought I may have shook you up a little bit with that presentation.
You did, that's why we asked you back.
I hoped I did, at least. So it's always good to say that, yeah, that was pretty right back then in 2019. I would say, though, that right now we are, it's always hard to say that we are in dire straits, but really we have experienced the pandemic during that time. I think that pandemic in itself was very much a wake-up call in that we managed to realize that, supply chains don't work like we think they do. They are actually prone to problems. And I think, I don't know if you remember, but this, the large tanker that went aground in the Suez happened right in the middle of that. And as an analyst, it's very difficult when you suddenly, you want to tell them that those who task us to do things in a report, in an analysis, that many things can happen at once. And that is where I think we have now experienced a time where a lot of things happen simultaneously.
And it continues to happen.
And it continues to happen. And that is, of course, where a scenario, if you look at a scenario as this is the truth or not, that may not be the right way to go about things. See it as a thought experiment instead and see what you can do with that analysis. We saw many, many things happening at once here, and that's why we are in a pretty poor situation and we need to start digging ourselves out of it.
We like digging in the mining industry, so
I know, that's why
Johan,
yes.
You also have a background in defense issues, and you have worked with Swedish Armed Forces and in the government office, the Ministry of Defense, and now you work with security and defense issues within the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise. Is it, out of curiosity, is it more exciting or rewarding to work with this kind of issue when it's getting more tense in the world?
Well, since my employer is probably listening to this, I have to say that it's much more better now. I think that for me, working now with the enterprise, with the Confederation, I usually get this question: have you changed side? And for me, that's a ridiculous question because I think it's all on the same side. What is pretty clear, though, is that what we also realize, I guess, within the government for a long period of time, that the key, the solution to deal with security supply issues doesn't lay actually with the politics, but actually with the private sector, because we are the main providers of both services and products, etc. So I think for me it's a little bit a natural choice to actually start work these issues within the Confederation, assisting companies. Yeah.
Like you mentioned, Johannes, that about the raw material supply, it doesn't work the way they should or people expect them to do. They have really, caught the attention of a lot of people lately, and it's increasingly important. And the European Commission is now working with and preparing the European Critical Raw Materials Act at this very point. How important is it, would you say, to secure our domestic supply chains?
I would say that it's very important, and that we are in a situation where we suddenly have realized, very late in my opinion, but just in time doesn't work. We need just in case, and that goes for smaller companies, that goes for public enterprises, etc. We need to have stores, and the question is more, how big should the store be to be sufficient? When it comes to raw materials, we really now see very clearly that we are dependent on these, and we are dependent on providers who are not necessarily there. They know they are on the other side of this equation. I actually brought a just published report, Strategic Autonomy. It's in Swedish, but I will push it anyway here, because as you say, the EU has a concept of strategic autonomy. It's very much a French concept. In Sweden, we have scoffed at it a little bit and said, yeah, it's very French, it's very centralized, big stuff here. But if you look at it from a total defense point of view that we are now pushing since 2015 in Sweden, it actually fits pretty well, and this report argues that. And I think it's quite an interesting view, in particular maybe for this audience, to look at what is strategic autonomy from a Swedish point of view. We know maybe it's not fully clear what the EU point on this is, but if we want to be there and shape this debate, we may have to have a better idea of what does it mean for us and what do we want to fill this concept with. And I think raw materials could be one of those things.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think what is really important is when it comes to raw materials, I think we have a little bit different possibility in Sweden than when it comes to many other kind of products. But we also need to realize that the Swedish economy, more than half of the economy, the GDP consists actually of export. We have 20% of all employees in Sweden now working for a foreign-owned company. So we have an economy which is heavily based on international trade. There is a lot of questions about the globalization is dead. It's not dead. It will remain for a long period of time, probably forever. But we need to look in diversification in a different way. I usually don't really agree with the opinion that the way for Sweden is to take everything home and do everything nationally, domestically, because that's not feasible. We don't have that kind of relation, and we don't have that kind of products, etc. in Sweden or any country. We are dependent on international trade. But this said, when it comes to mining, when it comes to strategic mineral metals, etc., it's a different case, because we do have a lot in Sweden and in Finland, which hasn't actually been mined, which hasn't been used, which is quite amazing that we have instead chosen to import it from other countries, and also from other countries where we have created a dependency. And now suddenly we end up in a situation where the Russian aggression towards Ukraine really have put this issue in the spotlight, realizing most people today, of course, realize that this is the kind of dependency that we had. We didn't understand that. Of course we did. We have known it for a long period of time, but for different reasons it has been much more simple to actually continue working as well as done, because it's cheaper and it's easier. So I think that diversification, understanding where spreading the risks are the key. If it is feasible to do it in Sweden, we should do it in Sweden. Otherwise, of course, should try to have diversification, importing it from different countries,
And
but
how
not
is-
put
how-
everything in the same basket.
Yeah, how is Sweden doing, would you say?
Badly today. I think we have, I mean, not only Sweden, most countries in Europe for sure has been quite naive for a long period of time. Usually in the government side or in the authority side in Sweden, we talk about this 30 years of strategic timeout. Well, also within the enterprise side, we have had a strategic timeout, only focusing, as Johannes said, on the just-in-time system, and also this sort of rosy way of looking at what is going on and happening. So I think it's high time. The problem, though, is that I wouldn't say we are too late, because it's never too late, but the reforms in new set of mind that we now started to talk about when it comes to mining, when it comes to many different areas, we should have started with 10, 15 years ago, because this will take time to rebuild, and it will take time to start actually digging up from the earth in Sweden, new minerals, whatever it might be. So we
to get the permits.
Yeah, exactly. But it's better to start now than not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think we have a lesson to learn.
Yeah. I need to ask you, like in many countries with large mineral deposits, like say strategic mineral deposits and resources, there is an increased foreign, or read Chinese control of these resources. Is that a problem?
Well, if you ask me, I think it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a problem who the owner is, because whoever is the owner needs to follow the laws and regulations of the country where they operate. And it's not necessarily so that you can tap the information of what's going on in the mine and bring it back home. So I'm not sure that the ownership of the particular mine is important in that way. However, it's very important to know where the boundary is and who is the owner in itself. And we have in Sweden very relaxed laws when it comes to foreign direct investment in Sweden. That has been very beneficial during this era of globalization. But I like to point out that we have the 4 liberties of the European Union, but we also extended that far beyond the European Union countries. And
Have you been too naive in practice?
I think maybe not naive is the word, but we have believed very strongly in globalization, and it's been a tremendous economic development in Sweden due to that fact. But we're also a small state, and when the larger states starts moving, we have to adapt, and that's where we are now in a situation where we cannot really influence the system. But I think the key point here is how do we keep what is good, the free trade, the system that we like, while simultaneously being more discerning. Now we are being pushed by the EU to have more screening of foreign direct investment, and that's good. Out of the FOI, we have gotten a lot of tasks to look into foreign direct investment and ownership, if it matters or not. And I think that is a very good step forward. The thing is, there is quite an easy way to solve this. If we are allowed to invest in your mines, go ahead and invest in our mines. If we can buy property
so there should be a mutual
it's a fairly
exchange,
easy way of starting to look at it, I think, that if we can do it in your country, you can do it in our country.
Do you agree?
I agree. I think I agree with Johannes that the owner per se is not the important thing here. And also when it comes to China, I mean, China is one of the biggest markets and economies in the world, and of course we will continue trade with China in every way. We continue what we have done so far, of course. At the same time, of course, what we do see is that there are worrying signs that the politics becomes more nationalistic, more focusing on different more internal issues, where we started to see maybe that politics starting to actually be superiority from the economy in a different way than in the past. And of course, all these are worrying signs, but that does not only concern China. That's also the case with many other countries. So the key here is again diversification. I think we have been naive, putting all the eggs in the same basket, and it's high time that we actually start to realize that we cannot do that. And it doesn't only concern China; it's also what we have done in many other cases. But again, I think that when we are now starting to plan for the future, we need to do it in a much more strategic way than we have in the past. It has been very short-sighted. We need to have a long-term perspective where we also need to realize that bad things can happen. We can end up in a new crisis. We can have a more problems with our deliveries, etc., than we have had in the past, and we probably will have that.
Yeah, and things can happen at the same time, as you said.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I need to finish off there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Johannes and Johan, for participating and sharing your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In September this year, the European Commission President von der Leyen was clear when giving her 2022 State of the European Union address. She said, "Without secure and sustainable access to the necessary raw materials, our ambition to become the first climate-neutral continent is at risk." And then she announced the European Critical Raw Materials Act. I will now hand over the stage to the Svemin CEO, Maria Sunér, and she will walk you through this Critical Raw Materials Act, for what we know now, together with Rolf Kuby, the Director General of Euromines. And they will explain why this act is so important to us. Please, but first, I should say a few words from the person who's actually writing the act. Head of Unit at DG Grow within the European Commission, Peter Handley.
The European Commission is preparing a Critical Raw Materials Act because we have been given the instruction by the European Council following Russia's invasion of Ukraine that we need to be much more ambitious in the way that we secure the supply of critical raw materials that we need for our green and digital economy and to become more resilient and less exposed to supply chain disruption. I can't anticipate the result of the thinking that's going on at the moment because we're due to present this proposal by the end of March in 2023. At the moment, we're looking at a full range of options. But these options are in 3 or 4 key areas. The first is better knowledge of which raw materials are most important or strategic for our economy, and which kinds of resources we need to develop inside the European Union or secure through diversifying our external supply. And we need to make sure that investments flow to these strategic resources and also that there is very high environmental, social and governance norms, and we probably will be developing standards to support our Critical Raw Materials Act. I believe that the European mining industry and the Swedish mining industry in particular are already very, very well involved in the process. They're feeding in a lot of ideas on what we can do through the Critical Raw Materials Act. My most short-term piece of advice is please ensure that you respond to our public consultation, which closes on the 25th of November, but it doesn't stop there. We continue to be in listening mode. We're really looking to be as helpful as we can, not only to the mining sector, but to those who are in the refining business, those who are in the recycling business. And generally, it's a value chain approach, and we want all parts of European industry to help us build a resilient supply chain for critical raw materials.
Yes, and with those words, we thank Peter Handley for that he could actually find a short slot piece of time in his very busy schedule at the raw material event. And now I'm here together with Rolf Kuby, who is the CEO of the European Mining Industry Association, Euromines. And before we go into the Critical Raw Material Act, I just wanted to ask you, Rolf, you are quite new, not to the Brussels scenes, because you've been around there for a very long time, 25 years as an experienced lobbyist, but not for the mining sector. You started 1.5 years ago. And what are your reflections so far on the perception of mining in the European context?
First of all, Maria, thank you, and thank you, members of Svemin and the team, for the strong support in Euromines. So it has been challenging 1.5 years. Euromines has completely changed from an organization that now needs to meet the ambition and really make a change in the Brussels scene. So it is very important that we are a face to the customers, that means the Brussels stakeholder, together with you, and that we guide the discussions. And we see that there are lots of misperception about mining. Many people in Brussels don't even know that mining in Europe exists, that mining in Sweden is something that needs to be tapped. So I think it's very important to be present, to be a face to the customer in these times. Unfortunately, downstream industry has been relying on commodity markets for 20, 30 years to provide all of the needed raw materials for the supply chains. This has dramatically changed, not only because of the war, it has changed already before because of Corona, and we understood that we need to tackle that issue. That is a unique momentum that we have now to create and to take responsibility for a part of the value chain that we have exported to the rest of the world. So autonomy, resilience is also taking care of the raw materials needs of Europe in a sustainable way. And this is the approach that Europe wants to take. Like we heard, it's about sustainable mining opportunities that we want to take, sustainable value chains in Europe that we want to secure. And the downside maybe to also not only be in a very optimistic way is that we see that Europe is losing out on its competitiveness, on energy crisis, on raw materials. And we see that the automotive sector is also going closer to the mines now. So we would very much welcome that we have a good knowledge of what is the potential of Europe, and that we will start to tap that, because this is not understood at this moment.
And we have been having that a little bit up in the discussion here earlier today, the fact that we often meet, as you said, there is no competence in the European scene on the fact that we have mining in Europe and that we also have a great potential. So how can we communicate around both the potential but also the fact that we can do this in a sustainable way in Europe?
We have an ally with Peter, and he mentioned that in his first request, is to better monitor, to better assess what is geologically possible, what we say about exploration. I think the word exploration is something which is not really used in the daily communication in media and in society. So we need to really get an understanding from media, from politicians, from society, that there is a potential in Europe. Today, nobody understands what geology is. The geologists who are working in Europe come from Australia and Canada. So it's not really skills that are in our set of ambitions in our society. So that needs to change, and then I think that's one of the biggest obstacles to also make a change with the announced Critical Raw Materials Act.
Yeah, and that is also one of the messages that have been the most important from us, from the Swedish perspective, to put into this Raw Material Act on actually the fact that mining starts in the bedrock. You need to know what you have in your bedrock in order to actually be able to tap that potential. So do you think that will come through in the Brussels scene? Do you think they will understand this and get it into the Raw Material Act?
I think they understand it. Now, I'm not 100% sure that they will follow us on our logic, especially our two logics, Maria and Rolf's logic on the issue, because it was mentioned it needs time. And Europe has no time today. So the first ambition of Europe is to source from abroad, try to find new allies, to shift from Russia to other strategic partners, and that rightly so. It's good to find solutions, but we think that it's also urgent time, and speakers before us also said we need to start now. We cannot delay any longer the fact that we have a potential here, and we have the best mining industry in Europe. I always say, some of the members who are in the room here, it is already 2050. So the technologies that are used in mining in Sweden are at the forefront of all of the technologies. Now, you need a bit more hydrogen, green electricity, and then we are already in 2050. So with our industry in Europe, we can easily meet our 2050 ambition of the Green Deal.
And we have also been discussing this a lot, me and Rolf, around the fact that we here in Sweden see that some of the obstacles to develop the European mining industry comes from the EU regulation. Here we talk about the nature protection portfolios, the Water Framework Directive. And what possibility do you see to actually change these directives in order to make it possible for mining to happen in Europe?
Brussels is a very unique and complex legislative body. It's different from what is happening in the parliament in Stockholm or in Berlin. So it has an agenda which is very long run. So we have a 2050 agenda from Ursula von der Leyen. That's how she started as president of the European Commission. And so there is a set of legislations that are worked on in that pipeline. Now, it will be very difficult to change these legislation, but I want to take the opportunity to have a new interpretation of legislation. So with guidelines, with the high acceptance that when a legislation is changed, you need to think raw materials. Now we are very often confronted with environmental legislation, climate legislation, different. And for good reasons, those legislations are there, but they don't think about the angle of raw materials. And if you want to expand your renewable energy production, you need windmills, and windmills need raw materials to be built from. So if you are revising a renewable directive, you should also have in mind think raw materials first, saying if you want to enable the Green Deal, you need to think about raw materials, because raw materials are indispensable to achieve the targets of the Green Deal. And this is something which is not present in the mindset. So we have a lot of silo thinking in Brussels, we have a lot of thinking in very valid right aspirations, but that are not interconnected. And we need to better interconnect all of the different ambitions that we have to meet that overarching target of the Green Deal.
And what would be your advice? I mean, Sweden is going to take the presidency of the European Union starting from the beginning of next year. And we asked the minister who was here earlier today on what she was thinking around that. But what is your advice? What can Sweden do to put mining on the map of Europe?
The presidency is always shifting from one country to another every half year. So it is a unique opportunity to also set the agenda. And it's a perfect match that the Critical Raw Materials Act is going to be delivered on the 29th of March. Hopefully they meet their deadline. And it's going to be in the Swedish presidency. So they can already set this in the agenda of the Compact Council, which is the Economic Council, but also the Environmental Council and the other councils, so that it will already kickstart inside of the legislative process, because the 29th of March, it's not a rule that everybody needs to apply to, because it's still going to Council, it's going to go to the European Parliament, so it's going to be digested, like I sometimes say, through the political machine, and it will come out somehow different at the end. But still, the Swedish presidency is really a unique opportunity to guide this new legislation and to put attention on the need for raw materials.
And what is the time frame, the time plan for this piece of legislation for the audience that might not know about the legislative procedure?
It's a co-decision procedure that is also quite unique with two chambers. So the Commission initiates the regulation, puts the piece of legislation on the table of the European Parliament. So they are going to work on it up to its plenary decision at the end. And the same for the 27 member states who are working on it in the Council. So it's always a question of co-decision and fine-tuning. One important legislation, maybe to quote now, is Repower EU. It's about energy. It has an opportunity with the overriding principle of public interest. So it would mean that renewables should be fostered, should be enabled better inside of the different member states' legislation. And this is now heavily discussed in Council. And people are saying, no, we don't want Europe to intervene with our Swedish, our Belgium, our Dutch legislation. But at the end of the day, we need to also seize this opportunity that Europe gives and wants to facilitate the development of a sector, be it the renewables in the state which is discussed today, or hopefully also in our future with a good regulation on critical raw materials.
And here in Sweden, I think when I listen to my members, they don't say that they want money, but that is something we are meeting in the Brussels discussion, that they think this can be solved with money. And I think if we who sit here think that we also need the permission to actually start the mine, to start the process, otherwise we don't need the money. But how can we handle that in the Brussels context?
In the Brussels context, sometimes I say it a bit sluggish, is that if you don't ask for money, you are not asking for anything. So this is a bit.
So you mean we have to ask for money, even if we don't say we need it?
And due to inflation, you might want to ask for even more money. But you are right. It's not about the money, and I think it's about the framework condition. It's about facilitating. Permitting is about allowing permitting in the interaction of legislation that are initiated from Brussels, but are an agreement between 27 member states, where Sweden at one point agreed to it as well. And then there is the national implementation that also is not necessarily always helping to make it easier for permitting. So there needs to be good understanding of all of the actors that something needs to happen, because otherwise it will not be possible. If I listen to what you are telling me about the long permitting phases in Sweden or in other countries around Europe, so it's not. It doesn't signal to me that all the actors have understood there is an urgency to tap the European mining potential.
Yes. I don't know about the time, Emma, here. It's a very confusing timer here. 2 more minutes. So, Rolf, to leave off this discussion then, what is your advice to the audience here? It's a lot of representatives, both from the Sweden, different authorities and the government office, but also the Swedish mining industry. How do we help you to steer this legislation in the right direction?
Yeah, first, and I mentioned it, that I'm grateful for your input as Svemin to our structure, in our committee structure. Then please use all of your possibilities to communicate to Brussels what you see as being the right approach and the right way forward. The Swedish presidency should not be the so-called honest broker and only make the agenda that the Commission is dictating, but should also initiate own requests. I've seen so many presidencies in Brussels. Most of them get something out of it. I would hope that Sweden also will get something out of its presidency. And it's not undecent to do so, because you are simply also continuing the agenda that the Commission has set, and which is also something that all of the member states agree to. Maybe Malta a little bit less than Sweden, but still it's an European agenda, and that's always the compromise that you need to see when you are acting in Brussels. It's about different cultures, different languages, different backgrounds, and I always say when you come to Brussels, you need to bring added value to Brussels. You should not come to Brussels simply by saying, how can I get the most out of it? But you need to contribute. So if I can invite through all the different structures, be it in the industry, be it policy, be it journalists, contribute to Brussels and also encourage Brussels to act in a positive way. Because very often Brussels is perceived as being a burden, an obstacle, and negative. Brussels is a unique opportunity, and I think that is something that we need to seize.
Yes, and we have a lot of work to do the coming year on this act. So thank you very much, Rolf, for being here.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you both very much. Before we continue, I would like to make a short announcement. Our friends at the Global Mining Guidelines Group, GMG, are giving a interactive forum here in Stockholm tomorrow and the day after tomorrow at the Epiroc underground mine in Sickla. And they have informed me that they have a few seats left, and I believe many of you in the audience might have an interest in participating. So please go see Heather Edney. Are you here? Yeah, please. There's Heather. Yeah. So please go see her later, and if you're interested. Cool. My family used to have a nanny. She worked with our family for a long time. She was originally from Chile. And when she tried to explain to our kids where she was from, they didn't really understand. And finally, she did like this. She took her fist. She said, Stockholm is here. Sweden is here. I come from here. This is Chile. And ever since, my kids have had a very interesting relation to the world. Despite Sweden and Chile, our countries very far apart, we have a long tradition of cooperation. In fact, there are some Swedish companies in Chile that have been active in Chile for over 100 years. Codelco is the world's largest mining copper producer, a Chilean mining company. And Codelco is in the mission of becoming more sustainable and setting bold targets such as reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 70% until 2030. In June 2020, Codelco and Swedish Mining Innovation signed an MOU to initiate a one-of-a-kind collaboration. And for the next panel, we will be discussing this MOU and the cooperation between Sweden and Chile. And we have invited for this next panel, Iván, Vejar, Deputy Head of Mission at Chile's Embassy here in Stockholm, and Daniela Blanco, Director of Technology and Contracts Alliances, and Hooey, he's Interim Acting Program Director of Swedish Mining Innovation. Please welcome them on stage. Hi, welcome. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Sweden.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Lawrence.
Hi.
Hi. Would you like to sit down or do you prefer standing up?
I don't know.
Either?
Yeah. Whatever you want. For me, it's okay.
Cool. Let's stand up. Let's get some energy.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Let's see. Where do I have my question? Yeah. Iván, as a representative of the Chilean government, how do you see this collaboration between Codelco and Swedish Mining Innovation?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I see this cooperation very good in two ways. First of all, in a way that we have seen that in the last COP27, the urgent call is to improve the action for sustainability for non-state actors. So in this case, Codelco as an enterprise, as the main Chilean enterprise, plays a key role, to fulfill this objective. And on the second hand, I have to say that it's a matter of pride as well, for me personally, because I was born and I grew up in Chuquicamata, which is the main copper mine in Chile. So it's very good to see representatives of Codelco here in Sweden, and look at me 40 years later on, talking about the cooperation between Sweden and Chile in this matter.
So things come together
Absolutely,
in different
yes.
ways. So how can Chile as a country benefit for this kind of cooperation?
Well, it's a matter of better practices. One of the main goals of international cooperation is to see and to learn of your counterparts and how to get the best practices and how to improve your own procedures. And in this regard, the MOU between Codelco and Swedish Innovation System goes in this way. Will help us to improve.
And Daniela, for Codelco, why is this collaboration important for you as a company?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this Svemin Mining Summit 2022. I'm very glad, I'm very honored to be here and to talk about this kind of collaborations. Well, I think that for Codelco, it's very important because we have huge challenges in the future, and we are not alone. And we have implemented since like 2 years this open innovation model that allow us to have collaborative relationships with the ecosystem in order to have more experiences and capabilities from everybody that jointly with our capacities are going to bring us better solutions, and we will be allowed to solve our challenges that are very, very big, and we have a very important responsibility with the country. So we have to be more sustainable in the future. And this is the way we think it's the correct way to do it, with everybody and in a collaboration.
So what has really been the goal for Codelco when pursuing this MOU?
Well, I think we have 3 objectives when we were seeing this collaboration. We see that we have like the same characteristics and the same problems to solve. So sharing experience was one of the main issues here in order to know more of what other peers of the industry are doing. And another thing that I think it's important to solve the problems that are common in common. So the collaborative experience it's a relationship that you have to build during the time. So it was an initiative that it could bring this long-lasting relationship to a more sustainable mining for Chile and for Sweden. So, and the other thing is that we can share our experience to the other mining companies and talk about the problems with different perspectives. So for Codelco, that has a lot of experience in doing mining and having one of the most largest mining copper and deeper copper. And we have a lot of experience, so we like to share that with other people. So I think these 3 things, to sharing experiences, putting our experience and capacities for everybody, and to share common problems and to solve them in common are the 3 things that we look for in this collaborative relationship.
And Lawrence, from the Swedish Mining Innovation, you work with mining innovation on a broad scale, really. Why Chile?
I think there's a number of factors. First of all, I think there is the background already from the country level. There's a memorandum of understanding working towards sustainability in general. And then there had been some collaboration, I mean, before our time, before we came in. But I think the main catalysts to actually kick off the MOU and the activities around it were sort of three factors. One, that our steering board made a tour through Chile and visited the mines and had discussions in 2017. And after that, then that was organized by Business Sweden. And after that, then we came in to start discussing an MOU and collaboration. And because it was anchored, I think, quite well within the top of Codelco, that the combination of Codelco's interest, our interest, and our local help from Business Sweden, we were able to set up a system and a way of working through the MOU that so far has become developed, and we hope to continue.
Yeah, but have you already, I mean, during these last couple of years we've had the pandemics has been around. And have you had possibility to develop any joint innovation projects, even though we have had these difficulties?
Yes, well, we have very specific problems that we want to solve with this collaborative issue. Like we have the cultural transformation, electrification, underground mining, and a sustainable mining. That were the priorities in collaborating this. So we start to join the teams and to start talking about and knowing each other. So we haven't set a list of projects yet, because first of all we will knowing each other and sharing some experiences and information. The pandemic obviously was an obstacle to join more and slowed the relationship a little bit. But now that we are getting to the normality or the new normality, I don't know, I think we are going to be able to know more about each other. We are planning to visit us in the countries and visiting the mines. And then we can start setting priorities and specific projects, because we want this MOU to be implemented in solutions to be more sustainable. So for us, it's a priority to continue this collaboration in that way. So the second step is to start planning which are going to be those projects.
And I believe there's a delegation from Codelco here in Sweden right now. You're
Yes.
not the only representative.
Yes.
What is your quest here in Sweden?
Yeah, we are with our specialists in electrification. So we are going to see what Bolivia is doing in that sense. It's part of this path that we have designed for electrification, and there is Gonzalo Ramirez over there, that he's the one in charge of that. And we are also visiting this with the technical people. So over there is Benjamin, and he's part of our Heritage Vision team, and she's with us because we need to see in place what is happening and how it works.
Interesting. We prepared the snowy winter for you.
Yes, it was fantastic for me. First time that I see a whole city covered with snow. So thank you very much for the arrangement.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Iván, how can you foresee that Sweden and Chile can join forces in sustainable mining besides this MOU?
Well, actually, the governments of Sweden and Chile have already an MOU in sustainable mining. The first one was signed in 2006 now, and the last one expired in last year, but now we are beginning the new conversations in order to renew this agreement and hopefully to keep working together and to include the new challenges and to set a road in cooperation to improve sustainability in the mining sector between Sweden and Chile.
So how is that preparation for that state-level MOU going? When can the new MOU be in place? Do you have any time frame for that?
Well, there's no time frame set it yet, but as far as we know, our Ministry of Mining is already deciding, or probably will send a draft to the Swedish counterpart, and then we will start the negotiations of this new MOU.
All right, thank you, interesting. And finally, Lawrence, when you signed this MOU, Swedish Mining Innovation said that you see collaboration, and now I quote, as a pilot for future collaborations with other interesting mining nations and international mining companies. What has happened since?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The coronavirus happened for 2 years, which kind of limited our ability to let's say travel and make connections with other countries in a way that would, let's say, support, like we had with Chile. We had a technical visit in 2017 and had some knowledge there. So what's happened since then? We've made our first other trip, let's say, with our steering board organizations to Canada.
So Canada is next in line.
This was in September. So we'll see how that works out. We'll work on that. I think that there's a lot of areas where, like, all the companies, and we can discuss, not just in bilateral, but make it a little bit broader to tackle the problems and share information. But we must discuss with all the stakeholders.
Okay. Iván, do you have a final comment? Do you want to add to the discussion about collaboration between Sweden and Chile?
Well, I mean, Sweden and Chile celebrated 2 years ago 200 years of friendship. And I think that the key at this moment is to continue working together in a very constructive and positive way, and in such strategic fields as it is mining and other fields as well. But now that we're talking about mining, I'm very glad that Codelco is here and that we can have something and can start planning for the future and work together. So that's
those are very nice final words. So thank you very much for joining us here for the Svemin Autumn Summit 2022. And good luck with your trip up north.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chile, as you know, is one of the major mining countries in the world. Now we will finish off this second session of the Svemin Mining Summit, or Autumn Summit 2022, together with 3 distinguished guests from 3 other major mining countries in the world. We are honored to welcome on stage the US ambassador to Sweden, and the Canadian ambassador to Sweden, and the Australian ambassador to Sweden. Please give them a big hand. Ja, det förstår jag, det vet jag. So welcome to the Svemin Mining Summit.
Thanks so much for having us. This is delightful. What a packed audience.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks.
And welcome. So please have a seat.
Yeah.
So I'll start by asking you, Mr. or Ambassador Ramanathan, you recently took a trip up north and visited the Kiruna mine. What were your key takeaways?
Well, I think, one, the importance of mining and minerals to Sweden's economy, and frankly, to the future of Europe. 2, a focus on quality, high quality over quantity. Certainly things were being mined in quantity, but thinking about what's the highest level of iron ore that we can have, or what are the possible discoveries still in rare earth elements and other things here in Sweden. So a real focus on quality. And the third thing would be state-of-the-art technology. Just incredibly impressive. I think I could finally envision a future career path for my daughter in her video games. When I saw all the joysticks involved in manipulating all this mining equipment from afar, and just just incredible precision craft.
Yeah. So that your key takeaway is the future education path for your daughter. Yeah, excellent takeaway. And I believe the two of you have also been quite recently up visiting the same mine in Kiruna.
Yeah, I've been up north 3 times since I've been here in the last year. I've been to Luleå a couple times, Umeå, Skellefteå, Kiruna. And what strikes me is, first of all, the universities. The universities in the north have created this dynamism and this vibrancy and this young go-getter attitude and a real talent pool. And when you combine that with the critical minerals and the renewable energy, you have a recipe for tremendous success. And that is why you're seeing so much activity in the north. It actually reminds me a lot of Canada.
That's why you like it, right? What about you, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, look, it's a similar experience that I've had. I think the first thing I'd say is visiting the LKAB mine in Kiruna is a typically Swedish mix of tradition and cutting-edge innovation. I think Sweden has such a rich mining history and has been responsible for so much of the global innovation around mining that it's important to be able to remember and capture that history. I think a second point would be you just see what's possible in a region like Norrbotten going through this amazing green gold rush, perhaps like all our countries in the 19th century and parts of the 20th century, what's possible when you have well-priced renewables, when you have good ores and then good connections with customers. I think it is a real inspiration for other countries, including mine. I should mention my son as well, who's 7, a bit younger than Erik's. His current obsession, it's a very deep one, is with Minecraft, which I think Sweden is also responsible for. So I could potentially push him down a more productive field into mining as well, once that obsession passes.
Sounds promising, yeah. What about your kids?
Yeah, I've got 2 daughters. They don't play as many video games, but they love heading up north. They love it up there as well.
Excellent. Sweden, is a leading mining country of Europe. And we have frontrunners in innovation and mining technology, especially in terms of sustainability. And for the Swedish mining industry, that focus is a constant, it's a given. And if I turn to you, Ambassador LaTorre, how important would you say is sustainability in the mining industry for Canada?
For Canada, it's incredibly important. It's hard to see the word mining without sustainable beside it. We have an initiative called Towards Sustainable Mining in Canada, TSM. I think you're actually aware of it as well. And it was launched by our Mining Association of Canada.
The Swedish, the Canadian Svemin, right?
Yeah, the Mining Association of Canada, that's right, in 2004. And the idea behind it is really to encourage mining companies to operate in an environmental and social responsible manner. But they've got, really key indicators, and there's actually somebody here from the Mining Association of Canada. I think Catherine is here. If you're here, raise your hand, because she can tell you a lot more about it than I can. But there's tools and indicators that encourage this good environmental and social responsibility, and they also make it more transparent. So companies report on these indicators that are related to community, energy efficiency, and environmental stewardship. And I think that's really important. So all of the Mining Association of Canada members must follow the TSM in Canada, and outside of Canada, 9 countries have adopted the TSM as well, including Norway, Finland, and Australia, actually. We'd like to see more.
Yeah, we haven't joined yet, but it's up for discussion, I know, and it's been for quite some years, so we'll see. What about, let's see, let's jump over to another issue here about attractiveness for the mining industry. The Canadian Fraser Institute publish an annual investment attractiveness index every year, where they rate how likely global investors are to invest in a specific mining country or province or state. For this year, it was published in February, March, and Western Australia, number 1. Number 2 is Saskatchewan in Canada, and number 3 is Nevada. So you're all like 1, 2, 3 here. So what will Australia do to boost attractiveness within the mining industry?
Well, look, I think the first thing I'd say is it reflects a very strong effort over many years and deep level of cooperation between, in our system, the national government and state governments, which have significant responsibilities in these areas. It is also very much a multi-stakeholder approach. I would sort of single out Australia's Indigenous community, which does have a very strong connection to Australian mining. The figure I can quote is that more than 60% of Australia's resources projects operate on land covered by a claim or determination affording rights and interests to First Nation traditional owners. And so I think one of the aspects of Australian mining that's been successful and why we've been able to develop so many projects in recent decades is our ability to bring stakeholders together. I think the second point I'd mention is continuously seeking to drive improvement. So there's a significant effort underway at the moment to work with stakeholders on environmental law reform to ensure our laws work better for everyone. We continue to provide targeted financing assistance for companies looking to develop projects. And when you think of the different support available through entities such as Export Finance Australia, the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility, and the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, there are multiple pathways where the Australian government is looking to support companies to get projects off the ground. I think the final point I'd mention is that unlocking the critical minerals that we need for the green transition, including the development of global battery industries, will take a sustained effort between different partners. And so we think obviously it will be private sector led, but with important government support and interventions. Because the timeframes are so long, in some cases we think there's a requirement for a joined-up approach and a willingness to share parts of the supply chain across different countries. And so that's one of the reasons, I mean, we're delighted to have the opportunity to engage with Svemin and with the Swedish mining industry, and as mining countries, our 3 countries included, to really promote the message that mining is absolutely essential to the green transition.
Right, and right now we're sort of sitting inside our awareness campaign that we have, you know, in the public transportation in all over Stockholm and online as well. And I know in the Canadian equivalent to Svemin, they have a campaign, awareness campaign with the same purpose as we have ours. It's called 30 Things. And I encourage you all to look it up. You just Google 30 Things, Australia. And it's a brilliant communication in knowledge building about mining and what minerals are needed for our essential products in our everyday life. And so let's see, let's continue here. And going over to what we've been touching upon more or less all day during this conference, like the raw material supply. And the importance and awareness of raw material supply has been growing rapidly lately. Here in Europe, the European Critical Raw Materials Act is on its way from the European Commission. And I understand the United States, you have a new national list of critical raw materials with some 50 elements now. What policies does that list entail?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, yes, we do have a new list. The U.S. Geological Survey has put together a list of 50 critical minerals. We have things like lithium, graphite, nickel have been featured prominently, along with the other ones we've talked about, I think, today. And the American Battery Minerals Institute has been also working on kind of these critical things in the battery supply chain. In fact, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act has almost $3 billion set aside for projects that relate to the battery supply chain specifically. So it's really all about long-term supply chain resilience. We have, representing here on the stage so many different types. The geography, as you talked about in the last say, is, obviously a lot of where mining has been historically is just around where findings were made. Going forward, so much of it's around what are the ESG principles that we've all come to believe in. Industry is largely driving the way. We have technology that allows geography to not necessarily be the sole determinant of our resilience. It really becomes much more about shared values and how to put together all of these, not just the elements I see here, but the ones that are named after were named right here in Sweden itself, like scandium and yttrium and terbium, two named after the same city even.
Yeah, that's right.
There are so many. We have so much need for really kind of diversifying away from places where those are being mined fairly exclusively, and building, but yet they exist. We know that rare earth elements, rare earth metals and oxides are here in Sweden, but that's not a major sourcing at the moment. So it's really building that resilience and helping use the technology and the know-how that we've built, the ESG and industry investment that we've built to make sure that we build those supply chains.
And I believe in Canada, you have a new mineral strategy coming up.
Yes. So just to go, I'll come to that, but just to set the context a little bit, what you were saying is incredibly important, right? So we're all seeing in this room a huge increase in demand for critical minerals. And if we don't provide the supply, critical minerals will become the bottleneck for our green transition. So the critical minerals is really key in this factor. Without critical minerals, there's no green transition. Secondly, at the same time, given the current geopolitical situation, countries are assessing and evaluating their vulnerabilities, and one of those is critical minerals. So in this context, Canada is putting forward a critical mineral strategy. It's not out yet. I'm not announcing it here. Please don't quote me. But there is a discussion paper online. It is supposed to come out this fall. And based on the weather outside, that should be very, very soon. But its purpose is to look at how do we boost the supply of critical minerals, number one. And number two, how do we enhance the security and resilience of our supply chains and those of our allies, including Sweden and the United States, Australia, and others. And so that's the purpose of the critical mineral strategy. And it looks at the whole supply chain from exploration to mining, processing, and advanced manufacturing. And there's so many connections right now between Canada and the Nordics, and especially Sweden in this area. The long-term goal for this is to help strengthen economic growth. It's to help ensure security, global security. It's to help advance our climate action goals and to address environmental stewardship. And in Canada, another important element of this is to help advance reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And so that's another important part of our critical mineral strategy. So stay tuned. It's coming out very, very soon.
Interesting. We will follow that closely. We used to have one here in Sweden too, and I just asked the Minister of Enterprise was here this morning when we can expect a new one, a new mineral strategy for Sweden. She said, might come up. I only been having this position for 30 days, but let's see. So there might be one in Sweden too. What action has your country, Australia, taken to ensure the access to essential raw materials or critical raw materials?
Well, it's a very similar situation to what Jason has set out. We see this as a vitally important aspect of the green transition, and for us it puts a real premium on partnership between like-minded countries. We are seeking to finalise a free trade agreement with the European Union. We're also in discussions at the EU level around a critical minerals cooperation and partnership. And given the state of the world, we think it is very important to develop those trusted partnerships. We're also working with other partners through the newly formed Mineral Security Partnership, which we think can play a positive role in addressing these issues. We are, our government announced last month that it will refresh our existing critical minerals strategy, and I think we'll sort of double down on many of the directions that we have pursued in recent years, including seeking investment from partners, including in Europe, and offtake agreements. I should mention a couple of other Nordic connections that are very important to us. One is Nordic and Swedish in particular mining equipment and technology companies are really at the forefront of decarbonising our extractive industry, and I mean that innovation is on display every day, and it's enabled also from the Nordics by 5G. And there are Australian companies who are very keen to develop mines here in Sweden. Companies like Talga, Alicanto, Oz Minerals have very strong experience and really want to contribute to the increased critical minerals resilience for Sweden and for Europe.
Thank you. And Ambassador Ramanathan, this agreement, that partnership that you were mentioning, this MSP, or Mineral Security Partnership, please tell us more about this partnership.
Sure. Yeah, it's something we're very proud of. It's all about increasing our cooperation between nations and communities of shared values and decreasing vulnerabilities. So Sweden and each of the countries on this stage are all founding partners of the Mineral Security Partnership. Vulnerabilities that we are really looked at strategically of where are the particular vulnerabilities within the elements we need, with things like rare earth elements, with lithium supply, with cobalt, in particular, that are coming from often places that are particularly subject to constraint. But it's also around the importance of shared values, as they've talked about a little bit, our belief in ESG and human rights, our belief in indigenous rights, our belief in equity and diversity in our workforces, our belief that investment screening is a key part of industrial processes, that we have to be aware of who has interests in our mines and other things, and where that information is going, whether it's data coming out of projects or whatnot. So these are all kind of key pieces of our shared value community, and it's about working as much as we can, not just on the extraction, but on the processing and all the other parts along the way in the supply chain.
Maybe we should just be clear that this arrangement is a U.S. initiative, right?
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, no, absolutely. So, I think we're still in the relatively earlier days, but we're really looking forward to engaging with the Swedish government and others to figure out what we can do within this framework to make sure that we're hitting all of those marks, that we're maximizing everything from circularity and recycling of minerals once they've gone through a full use, that we are respecting indigenous rights and finding ways to advance our goals across the board, while also making sure that we are decreasing those vulnerabilities around the minerals. As Jason said, there is no green transformation without this. So if we believe in this, and we must, this is the existential threat of the day, then we really need to cooperate in this way. And like I said, I'm looking forward to all the conversations that we have yet ahead about how we can collaborate to achieve all these goals at the same time.
Yeah, like we've been mentioning, Sweden is one of the partner countries in this arrangement. But how can we as a country best contribute?
Well, I think it's really about getting together and exploring what we each, not only what resources we have, but how we can think about, if processing of something is impractical here, or there's transport issues with how to move extracted minerals to a place for processing, for example, that's something where we can look across geographies within communities of shared values to figure out what we could do about that. It's understanding new discoveries and understanding where, we know what the supply is today, but what the supply might be if we had particular investment, and then working with investment communities and working with industry to actually make smart decisions so that we're not all making parallel decisions that might be over-investing in one thing and perhaps under-investing in another. I mean, these are all small examples of the kind of conversation I think that needs to happen. What will happen, circularity doesn't need to happen necessarily at the same place that extraction and processing happens. Sweden's fantastic at circularity, and capturing, battery materials and other things and reusing them. Maybe Sweden has particular expertise that can be lent to the other countries in this situation. So it's all of these things together. And it's really about getting together. We've all, I think, been working really hard to analyze our own situations. So now it's about putting all that together in ways where we can find real synergies.
Ambassador LaTorre, what do you say about this kind of arrangement or cooperation?
I think they're really critical. And we applaud the U.S. in leading this. I think it's exactly what we need to be doing. Look, this is a historic moment, I believe. It is a generational opportunity. We need to seize it. We need to be working together. This is one initiative that will help us do that. Sweden can contribute so much. All of our countries can. When I look at Sweden, I see the mining companies. I see the innovative high-growth companies like the Northvolts, the H2 Green Steel, Hybrid, that are all creating value from the critical minerals that are then plugging back into the supply chains that run through all of our countries here. And I think we need to ensure the resilience of these supply chains. We need to strengthen these supply chains across countries that are especially allies, and we need to add value and foster the green transition as quickly as we can, and that means accessing the critical minerals.
And finally, I'd like to ask you, you've all been here for a couple of years, but eventually you will be packing your bags and continue back home or to another destination. What Swedish innovation or cultural tradition or industrial feature will you sort of bring back home? Except for Minecraft, that can be accessible all over. Yeah?
Well, I love how Swedes celebrate the seasons. I come from Brisbane in the great state of Queensland in Australia, and it's pretty hot in summer and it doesn't get very cold in winter. And I've served much of my career in South and Southeast Asia, where there's a monsoon and there's a dry season, whereas here there's 4 distinct seasons. Swedes know they have to get through the difficult ones. They've got traditions built around them, and I think Lucia is perhaps my favourite, just in the depths of winter. And then you get to summer, and I've sort of taken to looking around just the streets and parks of Stockholm, and occasionally you just notice Swedes on a sunny day worshipping the sun. And
so you'll be bringing the seasons with you back home?
I'll see, yeah.
Okay. So what do you see? What are you bringing back to Canada?
Well, if there's one thing, so I was speaking. I won't say who it is, but it was the CEO of a company here in Sweden, and I said,
Is he in the room?
no, not in the room. I don't think. And I said, wow, Sweden has a really large number of multinational firms. They have a lot of innovation taking place here. Lots of high growth companies. Really dynamic, innovative economy. What's the secret? And he said one word: fika. So if there was one thing I would bring back to Canada, it would be fika to help foster and cultivate even more innovation and good ideas in Canada.
Excellent. We love sharing our fika. Yeah. And what do you say, Ambassador Ramanathan?
Well, Jason just stole mine. I was going to say fika because it's how it's how we build the people-to-people relationships. We need to do these kind of partnerships. It's how we go across, within industry, across different parts of the supply chain. This is how we're going to figure out how to innovate and our way out of this. I mean, this is the critical decade for action, and we need to build those relationships one-on-one. We need to forge those partnerships that are going to help us get out of this. And I can't think of anything better than fika. I'm looking forward to going into one just after this with all of you. And I hope that we can really talk face to face and figure a few things out, what the next steps are. And that is I think part of Sweden's secret sauce. So I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us here for the Svemin Autumn Summit, Mining Summit. And let's give them all a big hand. And you can remain seated. And thank you. That will be the final words from this stage now in this live broadcasted session of Svemin Mining Summit 2022. With that, I say goodbye to our online viewers. But for the rest of you in the room, now it's fika. Yeah, right. Okay, fika. Now we reconvene at 3 o'clock. Okay, see you back at 3 o'clock.
From the beginning.